Having root rot issues? I'll share how to save your plant from root rot. So first I'm going to be talking about what root rot is. Then I'm going to help you understand your plant roots just a little bit better. Lastly, I'll share some tips on how to save your plant from root rot. So if you want to skip ahead, feel free to do so. I've got the timestamps in the description below, but I do truly believe that understanding your roots a bit better will help you not only prevent root rot in the future, but will just help you better understand how to water, fertilize, and care for your plant in general. So let's get into it. So you know you're dealing with root rot when your roots are black, they're really mushy, and they kind of just fall off.
Gross!
If your roots are black and not mushy, they're fine. A lot of plants tend to have darker root systems, and also your roots may just be darker from the soil on them as well. So, you know, if they're not mushy, you're gonna be good. Now, root rot is caused by several fungi that thrive in soil that is overwatered or in soil that isn't well draining, hence why every care instruction card says plant in well draining soil. There just needs to be a good amount of aeration in your soil so your roots can breathe. If it's not, there's not enough oxygen going into those roots. And this is also why I always recommend letting the top of your soil dry between waterings, even for your real water-loving plants like ferns and begonias. You just want to let the top of your soil dry out. Now, how much you let that soil dry out will obviously differ between plant to plant. You know, succulents, they want to be completely dry between waterings, where, like I mentioned, ferns and begonias, they do love their water, but just letting that little bit of the top soil get dry before you water it will bring your chances down of having root rot problems. Now, if your plant is in well-draining soil and it was dry before you watered it, there could be some other reasons that you may be experiencing root rot. It could be that you may have placed rocks in the bottom of your pot in hopes to make the water drain faster, and maybe to fill up some space in your pot, but in reality what that does is really waterlog your soil, because the division between the rocks and the soil, the water kind of just ends up sitting there. And I can explain that more in another video, but essentially, yeah, it doesn't work. It becomes waterlogged, and in turn you'll experience root rot. So that could be it. It could also be that you haven't watered your plant in a very, very long time, and when you watered it, you gave it a big drink of water, hoping that that would really help revive your plant, but in reality it was dry for so long that that sudden surge of water was just too much and shocked your plant. Or C, it could also be that you put your plant in a pot that was just far too big for the size of your plant. Now, what I've grown to know is that to think small and pot your plant based on the root side, not by the size of the foliage. I used to just put my plant in any size pot thinking, you know, it can do this outside in the dirt and be fine. Why can't it work in a pot, you know? So I would put the smallest plant in the biggest pot and wonder why in hell they never survived. Now, of course, roots are there to hold your plant down so it doesn't just go blowing off in the winds, but they also absorb most of the water and nutrients for your plant. So let's talk root structure. All the exciting stuff within the root system happens at the very tip of your roots, and the tip of the roots can be divided into 3 zones. At the very tip, you've got the zone of cell division, and that's where, as you can guess, all the cells divide and they push that root down, and there's a root cap on the very tip of that. That's the very hard root cap that is there to protect the zone of cell division, and as those cells divide, they push that cap down further into the ground, and that above that is the zone of elongation, and you guessed it, that's where your root elongates. Above that zone, you've got the zone of maturation or differentiation. Don't know why that was so hard to say. And this is surrounded by the epidermis of the plant, basically the plant skin, right? And the little hairs that come off the epidermis is just single cell extensions of the epidermis. Now the epidermis, along with these hairs, is what absorb your nutrients and water. So a good way to tell a health of a plant is by how many of these root hairs are coming out of the roots. Because these guys, they'll increase the surface area of the root, so they have more room to absorb nutrients and water. So in turn, you got a bigger plant, right? So when your plant is short on water or nutrients, it will devote more energy into producing these little hairs, aka why it's good to water on the dry side, because your plant will then produce more hairs. Now when you overwater your plant, you actually will kill some of these hairs off. They'll start to die off. Now you can also kill root hairs when transferring your plant, repotting it. And in my case, when transferring to leca, you may also be killing root hairs by scrubbing them with a toothbrush or blasting them with a hose. But the good news is that these little hairs do regenerate. The root tip produces new cells on a daily basis, and thus also root hairs. Older root hairs, the root hairs farthest from the maturation zone, will die off, and simultaneously new root hairs will form, with a lifespan of only a few days to a few weeks. Leave your roots alone as much as possible. But if you have to, say you're transferring your plant into leca, you have to clean your roots, you have to get the soil off the roots to prevent root rot from occurring. In that case, you're going to have to treat your plant like you have injured it. And you're going to want to put your plant into a nice warm spot where it can recuperate, because your roots do like a nice warm environment. Alright, so let's talk about your plant. We now know it's definitely infected with root rot. The fungus is now thriving and it is attacking your very stressed out plant. So these fungal spores are going to be multiplying and spreading to even your healthy roots and killing them as well, even if you've corrected the soil conditions. Plus, this fungus can lie dormant in your soil, waiting to find its moment to come back when you've just overwatered slightly. So it's best to take your plant out of the soil. To get rid of this root rot once and for good, you're going to need to take a nice sterile blade or clippers, whatever you have, and remove all of the root rot that you see. So clip any of those roots that are infected with root rot. Now, if it looks like you're going to need to clip more than 20% of the plant's roots, I would say that you may be better off just propagating your plant instead, because your plant just may not recover, and that just may be your best bet in saving your plant. But I have heard like some plants, such as alocasias, can actually survive from just the bulb, even if the plant's die back. So do your research on exactly what plant you have. Maybe they're a little bit more persistent than other plants, but a good rule of thumb is about 20% of your plant's roots will likely be just too much for your plant to handle. If your plant is quite full and you can trim back roots and also take some foliage, that way your plant isn't trying to support all these leaves off a very small root system. You know, you kind of just want to balance your plant out as much as possible. Now you can dip your plant roots in a neem oil mixture, which I'll put up here for you. You can also sprinkle some cinnamon on your roots. Cinnamon is actually a natural fungicide, and I personally haven't used it, but I've heard really good things about it. You just want to make sure that you get the real cinnamon instead of like the cinnamon filler stuff, which is actually quite common. So just make sure you find pure cinnamon, or if you have hydrogen peroxide, you can also dilute this with water. You're gonna want to disinfect that soil that had root rot in it, and you can do so with the hydrogen peroxide. Make sure you pour that on top of the soil, and then you'll want to let that dry out before you use it, of course. You can sanitize your pot with that your plant was in as well, because it could even be lurking in that pot. I would just pick one. You don't need to do all of these things. These are all just options that you can use, whatever you're the most comfortable with or you have available, and try that. Alright y'all, I hope you and your plant the best. Follow me on Instagram if you'd like to stay updated on my LECA journey progress. I share some tips. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because I'm coming out with new videos just like this one every week. Thank you guys so much for watching.